Hi, I'm Tara Lipinski,
And this is Todd Kapistashi.
and you're listening to Unexpecting, the podcast.
Season 2.
Yeah, unknown episode. But we have a lot going on right now. I'm about to leave for Paris in a few days with baby Georgie. It's going to be very exciting. We're off to the Olympics, and I've been very anxious to get there. Obviously, every Olympic experience I love. I'm just an Olympic nerd, obviously, as an athlete, and now coming back as a broadcaster. Every single Olympics, I think like, oh, when will this get old? I think I've been to 5 as a broadcaster, and it never does. You know, in Tokyo, the last summer games, outside my balcony, the Olympic rings were lit up on the water, and I just got chills every single night. So I'm just pumped to get there, and I feel like Paris is like doing it up.
Well,
like,
as we record this, it's what, 3 days into it?
Yeah.
Or the opening ceremonies was a couple days ago, and it was pretty awesome.
the opening ceremony, the ceremony was so
We
cool.
had an argument about whether or not, which I think is an interesting conversation, where you were like, you know, if I was an athlete, I don't know if I'd want to be brought in on a boat. The idea of being in this like massive stadium with 100,000 people is so cool. And I feel like as you kept watching, your opinion on that changed.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Also, I realized at the end they brought in athletes to the end part of it where the torch is lit and all of that. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm biased because it's like I think back to my experience and it was so life-changing for me and impactful. And there is something about these huge arenas and you're in the tunnel and you're all corralled there, all of these athletes squished together. It's not just your sport. And you're in your team attire and it's just so loud from the audience. And then they're announcing your country and you just get so pumped when they say United States of America and you just kind of run out and you feel like these small little ants in this big stadium. And I just remember that rush. But I will say, you know, I don't know, floating down the Seine is pretty cool. And then still being part of it, you know, elsewhere. I mean, I have a feeling all future Olympic cities will now look at this as the roadmap of what to do, like integrate it into the city.
Yeah. Well, it's also just, I feel like props to France for just kind of breaking a lot of the molds and taking risks, because I'm always of the mindset of like, especially with like TV broadcasts, like shows, like, you know, stuff gets repetitive. It's year after year. You have a stadium and you have this sort of avant-garde artistic presentation for like closing open ceremonies a lot, which is fine and fun. But I just think like France, just having it outside, having like a bunch of different things under the monuments. It's just, it was, like they had a lot of good ideas. I know that there were also some misses, I think, on some of the more, like they had the fashion show runway thing. But again, it's like take risks, and I thought a lot of that stuff was a good effort to try to be cool and interesting.
I mean, and then Celine Dion on the Eiffel Tower, like that was nuts. And then the light show. Ugh, that's really exciting. So I'm pumped to be there, and I feel like the city is just alive with it. I saw some Instagram today that they're just doing fun things. Like Lady Gaga just had a surprise performance in the streets of Paris, and then these like a huge. I mean, I don't even know how to explain how huge they were. I don't know if you saw this. I don't even know if I like sent it to you on Instagram, but they took big rings and these guys were like rolling them down the street on top of them. It was like insane of all the 5 rings. And I don't know. I'm excited to get there.
Well, the other thing too, going back to the opening ceremony, which I find so funny is, you know, gosh, I forgot her name now, the tennis player, and she and LeBron James were the flag bearers, Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
And I just laughed to myself because if you didn't watch it, it like rained pretty hard during it, which kind of stinks.
I know.
Part of it, not that it was ruined, but you know,
but a little bit, like you didn't want, like who wanted it to rain?
But I just, you know, it's well known that LeBron James is probably a top 5 most famous person in the world, certainly athlete in the world, and one of the richest people in the world, or richest athletes in the world. And he's like sitting on the end of this boat holding the flag in the pouring rain in this suit. And it just struck me that, you know, LeBron's time is so organized now, where every second is $1. And, you know, everything is regimented. And just the fact that this like $1 billion athlete is like sitting in the rain.
Honor.
But that's what I mean. I think he knew that. And I think everyone knows that. So it's like, well, yeah, I'm with all these other athletes standing in the rain holding this flag. It was just, I guess it just sort of spoke to like how important the Olympics are and his recognition of that. And just, you know, every second's $1 for LeBron, but I'm going to stand for 3 hours in the rain holding this flag.
And I wonder, I bet, like, I would assume it not only is it an honor, but it's just such a cool experience. I mean, someone who, his sport, he knows inside and out. It's, every game he's going to these arenas and doing the same thing, but the Olympics are special. Obviously, I'm super biased about this, but I feel like
Well, I had made
most athletes feel that.
Yeah. Well, I had made the joke to you. I mean, because you had said, oh my gosh, like to be the flag bearer, what an honor.
Yes.
Like you wonder if you would have gone back to 2000 in the 2002
Yeah, you never
Olympics if they would
know.
have picked you.
I know.
I wonder who.
I have to go
did the
back and
flag
look.
then.
I don't know. I mean, there's been some awesome moments. I mean, I remember Midori Ito, I think at my games, lit the torch. Like that is awesome. I mean, flag bearer is very cool, but I think I ran with the torch in 2002, which was so cool. But I mean, can you imagine lighting the cauldron, being the last person, like to light up the Olympics that is mind blowing. Like I can't get over that. But yeah, so it's going to be fun. And we're doing the closing ceremony, which I'm now really pumped. Like the last ceremony we did was for the summer was in Tokyo, and it was COVID then. So we were in this amazing stadium, empty, just Johnny and Terry and I. And it was like, we just had to, and obviously the athletes and the performance, but it felt like a dress rehearsal because there was no one there.
Well, sorry, this is a dumb question, but was the last, I feel like I heard an athlete say this already. Was the last Summer Olympics also not attended because of
Yeah,
COVID?
that was Tokyo.
Yeah, I think.
And
'cause
then
I heard
Beijing was the winter.
Yeah, because I heard some athletes today actually talking about how like last year they had, I think it was someone who repeated as like a medalist, and they were like, yeah, it was
So
cool
different.
4 years ago or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
winning, but like here you're in France. Oh, it was someone who actually a French person won gold, so it was like a massive crowd and like huge like roar, and they were just talking about like getting second but still getting goosebumps for the person who got first,
and like the
because
audience.
there's so many people there.
Yeah, and that's the best. I mean, that's what I remember most of like skating, that program, that final performance. You just, the roar at the end, you just can't even hear your music. And I can't imagine skating in an empty arena. Obviously, it still would have been amazing, but so different. But I'm excited for the closing now because I feel like there's a lot of talk about things that happened in the opening. So I'm wondering what they have planned for the closing. It's obviously a big party, which is always fun. And then you take a look, because in Tokyo, we looked ahead to Paris, which was so exciting, and it gets you pumped up for the next Olympics. But the next Olympics is going to be here in Los Angeles. So it's going to be really cool how they tease that, because they always spend like the last section of the ceremony teasing the next games.
What did Paris do?
They did. It was awesome, to be honest. I can't remember, but it was a pretty good show. So that's going to be exciting. And then I feel like I'm also like glad to be feeling well. If you're following me on social, I'm getting a ton of messages of my recovery from endometriosis surgery, which is very fitting for our infertility podcast because, we may have a baby right now, but infertility and the diseases that go along with it just don't stop.
Yeah.
So I've been really struggling. I feel like
Well, just explain why you had the surgery.
Yeah. And I don't know if I went into detail, and I think I always downplay things because the last 5 years were, so horrific and so many different issues we had to overcome that I just almost became numb and be like, of course I'm ovulating through my medicine. Of course they're going to cancel this. And, after my last retrieval, which was one of the embryos was Georgie, I did that right before our surrogate Michaela got pregnant in January. And by May, Michaela was pregnant, but I was already feeling the effects. And I think I was so nervous about the pregnancy, I just put everything on the back burner and kind of overlooked the pain I was in. But, I've had endometriosis, and I think this is good for anyone who thinks they might have it. But, I never knew I had it because my symptoms were not the typical symptoms. Usually endometriosis, you just hear like heavy cycles and cramping and all of this pain. And for me, we joke about it, but it was like the butt zingers. And, I never had heavy cycles, and it just always threw me off. And when I had these symptoms last year, again, it threw me off because I was like, oh, I don't have the typical symptoms of endo. Like, what is this? Is this a flare up? But I knew it was, experienced enough now to know it was some connection, but it was very different than any pain I had experienced before. But I don't know if you remember, it was like one weekend I like was in so much pain trying like every heating pad. I didn't know what was happening, but I was getting my first endometrioma, which is they call it a chocolate filled cyst, like a blood filled cyst that forms. And that's clearly when it started, because then I went to Dr. Beck and I was like, you got to help me. Like, what is happening inside? Something's happening. And she's like, oh yeah, you have an endometrioma. So that was like a year ago. And it just progressively was causing me pain. I think it was messing up my cycles a bit. They were like shorter and just not the same. And I was getting tired of it. And then we went on vacation to South Carolina for July 4th. And I was just like in pain. Like, when I had to use the bathroom, or just like, to be honest, like days where I was just having this stomach aching and like pain. It made me almost depressed. I remember like sitting outside being like, what is this? So I just called Dr. Najat and I was like, I don't want to wait till after the Olympics and have this on my mind. Like, I want this cyst out of me. Like, just let's do it. And he's, so skilled. Obviously, any surgery is a risk. And a lot of people don't do surgeries for endometriomas if they're not causing you a lot of pain. But I just like trusted my gut. And I think this is something that's changed about me. Is like, you talk to your doctors, but you also need to take into account like what you're feeling, what your body's feeling like every single day, and know when it's time to take action. I think we even had a talk where you're like, well, like no one's like rushing you into it. Do you need to do it? And I just like felt very strongly like trusting that instinct that it didn't feel good, and I needed this done, and I'm so glad I did. So I went out to San Francisco. It kind of sucked because you were filming this huge shoot, which I'm excited to watch. But when is that going to be
out? Mid-September.
Well, just a pause on the surgery. It's Thursday Night Football, and I really am excited about this one, guys. I mean, obviously, Todd's a director and a producer, but we rarely talk about the projects you do, which we should, because then they can watch them and it's fun. But this one was cool. The setting, like, where was it at? It was at some huge.
Yeah, it's at everyone knows that we did meddling together.
Yes.
So I do mostly documentary stuff, but I also, just because it's so fun, do like little shorter commercials and opens, they call them, for sort of sports, television broadcasts. So I directed the open for the Thursday Night Football game, which will air throughout the year. So we shot, it's called the Cicada Club, which I didn't even know existed downtown, but it's like an Art Deco kind of big, I don't even know what they do there, honestly. I think it's like a music venue, but they have like, you can have dinner there, and it's like a jazz sort of Great Gatsby sort of vibe there. So we shot all the Thursday Night Football talent.
But it's going to be like this big
crowd.
party. It's fun. It's a fun concept. Like crazy stuff goes down, and I'm excited to see it.
But yeah, I couldn't, it's like one of those things where there was going to be 200 people there. I couldn't like cancel it.
Yeah, all the talent, right, was involved.
It was the only day they could do it. So I just couldn't go. And that's when we had the conversation of like, well, if you just put it off a little bit, I can go and I want to be there, but you just wanted to get it done.
I wanted it done. And I also have been through it twice. So it wasn't like the first time. I think I probably wouldn't have been able to do that without you if it was the first time, but I kind of knew what to expect. And my best girlfriend, Erin, skating buddy from when I was a little kid, and we're still so close. She and her family actually travel the world, and they do all this YouTube stuff, and it's incredible. It's really fun. But anyways, she decided to come out and help me, and I'll never forget it, because it's like one of those friendships that, A, she's like a sister to me, but B, when I think about those 4 days, like she chose to come visit me, and I said that to her. I was like, if you don't want to do this, like we can have another trip where it's fun. She has 2 kids. It's not like she can travel that much. She's like, no, like I need to be here for this one. And it's the boring, like working trip. I took Georgie. I got sick from the anesthesia. She's like running around, holding bags for me to throw up into, and setting her alarm in the middle of the night. So I take, stay on my meds. And you just look at those friendships and you're just so grateful that you have people in your life like that. So, but yeah, I went out there, I got it done. Good thing I got it done, because when I woke up, Dr. Najat was like, oh my goodness, the endometrioma was leaking. So it had ruptured. And because I thought it was going to kind of be this quick thing, we just do that. There was probably not too much endo left over, but I was like, just clean me up lightly from all the fertility treatments I did, since hopefully we're not doing anymore. And he's like, I couldn't help. It was extensive. He's like, he called you and you relate it, but just that it was all over my bladder, and, I don't even remember what else he said. Over, like, bowels were stuck together. Like, he just really, when I text him, because the recovery has been a little different. It's just like a little bit longer, and I'm feeling a lot more inside already. I feel sort of, this is what, 2 weeks today, actually. And I feel kind of good to go. Other than just some, still like things figuring itself out inside of aches and pains or little zings. And I was just checking with him because the last one, I felt like 2 days out, I was just like, didn't even know I had surgery. And I kind of feel like that. I mean, I feel like I could do anything. I'm not restricted at all. At least I feel that way. I probably shouldn't be picking up the baby, but I'm picking up the baby and doing all the things. But he like wrote to me and he's like, yeah, we had to like painstakingly remove the disease that was like covering every organ. So you're going to feel 1,000 times better after, but there's just so much inflammation from that. And then they also took my tubes, my fallopian tubes, which is, that was like a last minute thing. And it was because I checked in with my doctors, my OB, Dr. Beck, and I was like, I don't need my tubes. Let's get rid of them. And then I really didn't realize, and hopefully if anyone's listening here, who knows what surgeries you might have, or even if you would want to just do this as a precaution. But all of them were just like 100% take the tubes if you're not using them. And we have embryos. So if we did try to get pregnant, it would just be through my uterus, not through the fallopian tubes. And I didn't realize it, but like it's a huge reduction in risk for ovarian cancer. And then I like was doing a little more digging, and it's crazy. You just don't know these things, right? Like until someone tells you. And thank goodness I thought of this and last minute did it, because it would have sucked if I went through the surgery and they didn't take them out. But I guess I was looking at a recent study where they knew that many of the ovarian cancers start in the fallopian tubes, including the most common aggressive one. But they're saying now that maybe all of them actually start in the fallopian tube, and they're doing like, more studies and things like that. But I mean, that is just for me like a, huge relief to just get them out. And I think women, obviously, if you're listening, should know about that too, because that was something I just didn't know about.
Yeah.
I thought people took out their fallopian tubes as like birth control prevention solely. So I did that, and he cleaned up my uterus, and I guess I had scar tissue in there maybe from the last 2 miscarriages. And yeah, but I'm feeling good. The recovery was a little different. Like I said, usually, like I have a picture I put up on Instagram of like my hands over my head feeling the anesthesia of just like, woohoo, like, and Aaron took a picture as I was being wheeled back, because as we've talked a lot about, I love the anesthesia portion of it because everything sucks about surgery. But when you start to feel good in those moments, you're like, who cares about anything in the world? But I felt good then. But man, I woke up and I was just struggling to come out of it this time. And you realize like it was a longer surgery, a different hospital, they use different medications. And for some reason, I don't know, I had my surgery at 8 a.m. and it was like 3:30, and I was like, whoa, I'm like climbing out of this hole.
They were like kicking you out.
Yeah, and I was like, I can't go. Like, I don't know where I am. I keep falling asleep. Like, I was so out of it. And then in the car ride, I was nauseous, and I was like, this isn't normal for me. And then all night I was sick. Every time I got up, I just puked, which was awful.
Yeah.
And you don't want, I mean, should you tell the story about what it's like when I'm nauseous?
Well, I think we told that story.
Oh, have we?
I think it's season 1 of Unexpecting.
Oh, I don't remember.
I think it's just
give him a little glimpse.
It's a very aggressive moaning sound that
when I get nauseous
for days. So like think of this sound every 12 seconds for like 4 days.
Wait, let me just preface this though. Like I hate being nauseous. I feel like I can deal with like pain in different, like something different, right? Like if it's like, oh, you hurt your leg or you hurt your back or whatever it is. But nausea, I cannot do it. I am the biggest baby. What does it sound like?
It's that for like a sustained like 15 seconds, about every 12 seconds on repeat for days and days and days.
Yeah, I have to make the sound.
And at first I am empathetic and feel so bad for you. Then my day 3 of that noise, it's sort of like, okay, I know you don't like to be nauseous, but this noise is a bit much. Can we
it's like
just
a
like
dying elephant?
Yeah, can we just I don't know.
Yeah.
Muffle it somehow.
I hate that. Erin actually knew that about me, because we've been friends for so long, and she told the doctor before he went, she's like, don't let her get nauseous. And then of course there I was nauseous. But it is for anyone who's like nervous about going. I should do a highlight reel if you follow me on Instagram of all the things that my little tricks of, sometimes you get this pain in your shoulder because the gas they fill up your abdomen with.
You didn't get that this time.
I didn't get that this time, which was crazy, because usually that's a pretty painful part of it. And you get this awful pain in your shoulder because it's hitting a nerve. But I prepared with all my, tips from doing this so many times of peppermint tea and peppermint gum and peppermint, cough drops. And, you take your throat coat tea because of the tube they put down your throat. And usually day 2, that's when that starts hurting. So I feel like I kind of got it down to a science of my heating pads. And I never take the hardcore drugs. I just do the Tylenol, Advil switch, but I'm very diligent about the alarm and not dragging behind. But usually by day 2, I'm sort of weaning off of that already. And, I think it also has to do with your surgeon, who Dr. Najat is so, renowned and so skilled that, his recoveries are, I feel like, super smooth. So, but it really overall this time, I felt so fatigued and tired. I don't know if it was like all this inflammation in me, but I just been struggling a little bit more with weird aches and pains. And, a lot was touched, my bowels, my bladder. Well,
what's weird is that the recovery was worse on this, but you tell me, and I don't want to be insensitive to how much it sucked to have to go through this again, but like the stakes seemingly were so much higher on the other one.
Yeah.
So like emotionally, it was like way more difficult because it was like, okay, we're going to do this thing and we're going to get pregnant. It's going to fix everything. This was sort of like, okay, I have a cyst. We have to remove it. I'm in pain. Maybe this will be better in the long run. I'll be in less pain from endo. So there were stakes, obviously important ones, and the surgery wasn't fun. But last time just seemed different. Like we were both so nervous and excited.
Yeah, everything was so heightened.
And it was on your birthday. It was
like
that whole thing.
But it was like a continued, right? Like it was like, what's next? Would that surgery fix it? And this time it just feels like.
Now we're just taking the fallopian tubes out.
So now we're just,
Don't need
this
them.
time we're like, take it out.
Yeah.
And then, so that's my, of course, always reach out to me. I've been getting so many messages from people that are either going through hysterectomies or endo surgeries. There was someone who reached out who had it like the day before me. So it was interesting to see like how we did afterwards. But, I'm feeling good picking up the baby. I think I'm going to do a little light exercise on Thursday. And I'm feeling good.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
As you know, I love sharing all that I've learned on my very long fertility journey. And at the beginning of that journey, when I hadn't begun my research or had years of learning and understanding what the best steps I could take were, it was stressful. And when it came to picking a prenatal, I didn't know what to do at the start. What was the best prenatal for me? But you know me, and you better believe I did the research and was immediately at ease when I found Ritual Essential for Women Prenatal. It takes out the anxiety-inducing guessing game process. With Ritual, one thing I didn't need to worry about was whether I was getting the key nutrients I needed to support my trying to conceive an IVF journey. When it came to IVF, I wanted to get the most out of every single egg retrieval. And I chose them for a few key reasons. I love that I can count on the science-backed key nutrients, especially methylated folate and nature-identical choline to support baby's neural tube development. I knew those two were important ones that were must-haves for me. And also, it was game-changing that Ritual's Essential for Women's Prenatal multivitamins are rigorously tested by a third party for allergens, microbes, and heavy metals. And it's clean label project certified. It's so important to know what you're putting into your body, especially during your pregnancy journey. And with Ritual's dedication to traceable science and sourcing, you always will. See for yourself with 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/Tara.
Speaking of no fallopian tubes, we talked to a surrogate last week.
Okay, guys, we're hopeful. This has been a long journey this time, and she was really sweet. Something felt like just right. We did the FaceTime, and we're gonna now get to the medical records part of it, which the medical records and the medical evaluation is where we've been getting tripped up. So if we get through that, who knows? Maybe this is the surrogate and we are going to start round 2 as soon as we can, which is just crazy to think about, but also makes me so nervous. Like, I remember when we had the FaceTime, I was like talking to her and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be so chill this time. And I was like, I could tell I was not. I was like talking way too fast and loud.
She was like, are you chill? What part of this is chill?
Yeah, she's like,
have we talked about this in the podcast? We have to have had just the decibel level of your normal speaking voice. You know what I've realized though? It's actually not like when we're talking here, you're fine. When me and you are at dinner, you're fine. It's when you're on a phone or a call.
Yes.
It's so jarring. Like I sometimes like when we're on, we'll be on work calls sometimes and I'll like tap you because you're like screaming and I can't imagine on the other end their like speakers are like blowing out. They're like tweeters are exploding.
Guys, I don't know what it is. It's also when I'm in a car. I feel like I have this like white noise sound that I have to talk over.
But then you always use this is funny the thing that Tara does. Like clearly her hearing is fine.
I don't think it is.
Whenever I question her volume level of speaking, she's like, I just can't hear. I'm like deaf. I'm deaf. I gotta get my ears checked. I'm like, no, I think you just like get excited on the phone for some reason.
No, I'm going up to reach over something that's happening. If anyone's listening, tell me if you have this problem.
Wait, reaching over something?
Yeah, because like it feels like right now I feel like we're talking. There's nothing strange going on in my head, but when I'm in a car and it feels like there's this white noise, or it's like for you to hear me in the car and for me to hear myself, I just have to like.
Yeah, but if you were to pick
higher.
up your phone right now and just call someone, your decibel level would go up by 100 times.
Okay, so I feel like we have another topic. What was on our list?
Well, I actually think we should, and I know you probably won't because you get a little sensitive talking about political issues, but there's been so much stuff politically on this cycle surrounding, we've talked about a lot of it actually on the podcast, but around reproductive health.
Yeah, let's touch on it. I mean, I get sensitive just because, this is an infertility podcast and I want everyone in this community to just feel at ease no matter what their views are. But clearly we have some views and I feel like it is interesting, so much as this past year just.
Yeah, but in the last week, like a week ago, JD Vance sort of had this thing about, and I guess you could argue it was taken out of context, but he basically, in summary, he essentially said if you are a cat lady who can't get pregnant or doesn't have kids, then you're kind of not contributing to society or to your country. And then Jennifer Aniston came out and was like,
it's
you're
just
an idiot.
Also, it's just so crazy in 2024 that if you don't have there was a comment made about a woman not having a child.
Yeah, it was an old comment, but still they're like digging all this stuff up that he said.
But it's very Handmaids, It's just very. I don't know. I think about the Handmaid's Tale a lot this year when we talk about these things because it really does feel like there's similarities.
Yeah, and then Kamala Harris now, who is the nominee, she's like JD Vance, I think, was attacking her because she has like a stepkids and sort of saying they're not her real kids or something.
So. I know. And see, that's where I do think we can talk about it here because, I mean, this is a space for everyone to feel, heard in their fertility journeys. And again, some of those outcomes mean sometimes childless living or lifestyles, and that doesn't mean that someone's failed or
I mean, just think if you just cannot for whatever reason have children, that you would be attacked for that.
Yeah, it's just it's really sad.
Yeah. I think one of the most fascinating things, and I don't want you to get like comments on this or people like giving their opinion, but I would love to understand there are clearly people who've had fertility issues who can probably afford things like IVF, who are probably maybe deeply conservative, maybe share some of the views that JD Vance has. Like, where do they fall? Like, what do they say about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's
things?
some listeners that, have conservative views that listen to us. So yeah, I'd be interested.
I mean, is it just sort of like, well, I guess I don't really agree with IVF, but I really want a kid. Like, that's how human beings work.
Right.
It's like, that's why politics are so crazy, because I think people, when they're far removed from a political issue, can have a view, then when you're deep in it, it totally changes everything, I think.
Yeah. Or you're confronted with something that you thought you'd never be confronted with.
Maybe you get more information and you change your view.
Right. I mean, it's interesting you're saying this tomorrow. So I've talked to you guys. I am working with Rune. It's an app. They have a bunch of different diagnoses like ALS, and they're doing one on endometriosis that I'm helping them with, but they just put out one for fertility. And I'm doing this really cool conversation with Elizabeth Carr, who was the first IVF child. And I was like doing my research, and she recently was just sort of quoted like, I feel like an endangered species because of everything that's happening in the world today. And I just thought that was like an interesting thought of, what is it, 2%? I would have to, don't fact check me, but I think it's 2% of the world's population is IVF babies. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it is. And it is like she's right. Like, and that's Georgie, like an IVF baby. If they just stopped all of these incredible humans that are changing the world and, creating these beautiful families for people, it would be over.
Yeah.
It is nuts. So I'm going to talk to her tomorrow and ask her all about it. I'm also going to ask her, we should do an episode on that because I'd be interested too. And maybe you guys can send in comments or questions or just thoughts beforehand. But part of the interview I thought is like, I wanted to ask her like how her parents talked to her about being an IVF baby, or, for Georgie, it's going to be IVF and surrogacy. And how do you go about that? And when do you start telling them? I mean, we're going to be obviously very open about it, but I just think that's an interesting topic too. So anyways, that's on my list tomorrow, and then off to Paris. So I feel like we've caught you guys up. All right. Bonjour. Au revoir. Thanks for listening to Unexpecting the podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, and follow Unexpecting Pod on Instagram for info about upcoming weekly episode releases.